Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be revealing the Open Great League team that I used to climb up to 2847 ELO, which, the next time leaderboards update, should put me right around top 5 in the entire world. Now this team is built around a Pokemon that got buffed this season, and that is Kingdra. Kingdra got access to Surf, and now with Dragon Breath, Swift, and Surf, it is one of the most flexible and dynamic Pokemon that you can put on your Great League team. For the lead, this team uses my rank 1 Shadow Celio, and as the closer, the ever-dependable Unova Stunfisk. So, without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we pick up a bit of an awkward lead in the first match, Shadow Celio into Tinkaton. Now, Shadow Celio can actually play this matchup quite closely, because Shadow Celio is able to outpace, and Surf is still going to hit for some very nice damage. So even though this is technically not an amazing lead matchup, getting damage on Tinkaton is very helpful, because Tinkaton teams are almost always weak to Kingdra in the back. Here I get to farm up past the Surf, go for the Body Slam bait. My opponent has so much energy on this Tinkaton that they're forced to put up the shield. I'm very comfortable double shielding in this lead matchup. Neither of my back Pokemon really require shields to be good. My opponent sends in Feraligatr, and now I get to bank a ton of energy and then send in Kingdra. Even down a bunch of energy, Kingdra is so dominant into Feraligatr. This Feraligatr is actually on Crunch. Now that is not the typical moveset that did throw me for a loop a little bit, but the nice thing is I should still make double Swift before they're able to make their double Crunch. My opponent is forced to settle for the double resisted Hydro Cannon. The Hydro Cannon will still do a little bit of damage onto the Kingdra, but it's not going to be enough to take the knockout. Now I can fire off Swift. Swift is going to pick up the KO, and when my opponent brings in a Shadow Primeape, I immediately pivot back into the Shadow Celio. I have so much stored energy from earlier in the match. I fire off Body Slam, I wait the turn to ensure no catch onto Tinkaton, and I fire off Body Slam number 2. That is massive damage onto Shadow Primeape. Shadow Primeape is a very powerful sweeper, but if it doesn't have shields to protect itself, then it's just going to get absolutely shredded. Primeape is now at +1, but even if they're running close combat, a +1 close combat does not one-shot Unova Stunfisk from full HP. Close combat lands, I'm able to hang on, back in comes the Tinkaton to get knocked out by the Mud Bomb. Opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to the next match, leading Shadow Celio into Seaking. Celio does have a pacing advantage here over the Seaking. However, in the zeros, the Powder Stones plus 2 Body Slams barely missed the knockout. So usually the goal is to try and soft lose this matchup and set up farm for the Kingdra. So I fire off Body Slam number 1, I'm going to throw 1 Powder Snow, wait the turn, and then try for a Body Slam catch onto Sableye. That's one thing I do really enjoy about the new system, is the fact that every time I wait a turn, I can consistently see what my opponent's doing. That was a pretty big frustration of mine on the old system. The new system, it definitely has stuff they need to work on, but I really appreciate the fact that I can now consistently wait a turn, because on the old system, I just couldn't do it for probably the last 2 years, at least with any consistency. My opponent did go for a Drain Punch the first time. I decided to put up the shield as they're highly likely to full send the foul play. My opponent pivots into the Seaking, but before they're able to make the drill run, I can fire off the Swift. Swift is going to connect. That's going to be a charge attack priority tie Swift to the drill run. Kingdra is going to be able to tank this no problem, but now I can send in the Shadow Celio and go for a nasty Powder Snow down. Now I have enough energy to outpace the Sableye. My opponent cannot bring in the Sableye. It's just going to get knocked out by the Surf. They're going to have to reveal their final Pokemon, which is Licky. And getting damage on Licky is just going to be instantly game winning for me. Not only am I going to get a Surf, but I'm actually going to get 2 more Powder Snows and a Body Slam as well. I was hoping to make double Surf, but I didn't quite have the health remaining. But still, I basically got through 80% of a Licky's health bar. How is Shadow Celio this good? I do not understand. Licky will go for the Shadow Ball. They can even go for another Shadow Ball. It's just not going to matter. My opponent knows it. That's basically why they just don't throw their energy there. I can fire off Discharge. Discharge will take the knockout, because if they ever throw that Shadow Ball, then I can just farm up to where I can always outpace the Sableye and win the game. Sableye's foul play will not knock out the Stunfisk, and now I will be able to take the win with the Mud Bomb. If my opponent had gotten the catch onto the Sableye early in the game, this game could have turned out very differently, but luckily they did not, and were able to get the win. Great lead in the next match, Shadow Celio into Fearow. One thing I noticed is a lot of Fearow lead teams are ABA weak to Celio, so they'll stay in and fire off a Drill Peck just to get some damage. Now my opponent's going to be safe switching into a Seaking, and I'm going to fire off Body Slam just to get a little bit of chip damage, and then look to send in the Stunfisk. So far, my opponent is very, very weak to Stunfisk. So I figure I may as well put Stunfisk on one of its good matchups. My opponent is going to be Icy when debuffing me, but I think with all the chip damage I've already gotten onto the Seaking, that a -1 Discharge will still KO. I fire off the Discharge, cross my fingers, Seaking gets KO'd, and in the back, my opponent has Alolan Ninetales. Now this is obviously pretty bad considering my final Pokemon is Kingdra. I fire off Mud Bomb, that really does not do much, and I pivot back into the Celio. I needed to reset the attack drop on the Stunfisk. Stunfisk already does not do a lot of damage onto Alolan Ninetales, and I'm gonna need all the damage that I could possibly get. Ninetales reveals their secondary charge move there on Chilling Water. Chilling Water will set up a farm down, and I'm gonna have to rely on Kingdra to close out this game. Now, Kingdra is kind of the GOAT, so I actually think Kingdra will be able to pull off miracles here and get the win, because the Alolan Ninetales has lost quite a lot of its HP. I'm going to put up the shield. If I ended up no-shielding a Weather Ball, I was a little bit worried that my opponent would then be able to go for Chilling Waters and debuff me. I want to keep my attack stat intact, so that way I will actually be able to take the knockout with the Surf. The chip damage that I got from earlier in the game is actually paying off pretty nicely. My opponent's play is always just to try and go for a catch, so what I have to do is just keep farming. I'm just simply never going to throw the Surf. My opponent pivots into the Fearow, and now I can bring back in the Stunfisk. Stunfisk will be able to outpace the Fearow. The Fearow was completely energy dry. Discharge will take the knockout, and that instantly ends the game. Even if Ninetales is able to exit with the charge attack, Kingdra wins charge attack priority. Although it turns out we're not even going to need that Surf, as Mud Bomb from the Stunfisk KOs the Ninetales. We move to the next game, Shadow Celio leading into Malamar. Now this is actually a pretty okay matchup for Shadow Celio. If it's the Shadow Malamar, then Shadow Celio wins the 2 straight Body Slam, but if it's the regular, even if they land a superpower, that's something that I can survive. My opponent safe switches into Seaking. This time I decide to bank the energy and then send in Unova Stunfisk. Stunfisk down energy actually doesn't have the greatest matchup ever into Seaking, because Seaking's able to apply the Icy Wind debuff and then suddenly have a lot more survivability when I fire off the Discharge. My opponent will try and go for the charge attack priority tie. I'm going to be no shielding here, Drill Run will not be enough to take the knockout, and I'll get to fire off the Discharge. A rare moment when I didn't really want to overfarm because I just want to lock in damage on the Seaking. Seaking will fall, now I get to pivot out, they send in his Sweet Electrode, and I get to send in Kingdra. My opponent basically has 2 full health Pokemon. I have 2 very low Pokemon, although my Shadow Celio does have a charge stack. But in a scenario like this is where Kingdra can absolutely shine. I just get to spam out Swifts, putting so much pressure onto the Hisuian Electrode. Even as Electrode spams out charge attacks, the Dragon Breath pressure is so oppressive. They go for the Wild Charge, there's the pivot into the Malamar, and I'm going straight for the Surf. I need damage or the final shield. Surf is going to connect, that puts Malamar low, and we're going to get the catch onto Unova Stunfisk, and that is going to slam the door. Stunfisk gets KO'd, but now I can bring back in the Kingdra. Kingdra gets the full farm down. It turns out we don't even need that charge stack stored on the Celio. The camera goes a little bit crazy as my opponent will resign the match. We move to the next match and we actually see Hisuian Electrode once again, but this time it's going to be on the lead. Hisuian Electrode is a Pokemon that is surging in popularity at high elo in the Open Grey League. Hisuian Electrode has absolutely unreal coverage, its pacing is great, it is pretty good bulk as well, but unfortunately for my opponent, it does not have a good matchup into Shadow Celio. Now my opponent ends up safe switching into Licky Licky. I tried to throw 1 in the move there, but the game did force an overtap, so I ended up throwing 2 in the move, giving my opponent a free rollout. So that's also something they're going to have to fix with this new system, is occasionally there will be these forced overtaps. I haven't really had them too often, but I did have it there, and I really don't like it when my opponent gets any extra turns other than the bare minimum. My opponent's going to fire off back-to-back Shadow Balls. I'm pretty okay with this. One of the reasons Stunfisk is on the team is to be a gigantic meat shield. My opponent is going to make a very nice catch as they catch Discharge back onto the 1 HP Electrode. But honestly, that Electrode was very close to an Energy Ball, so I don't mind throwing energy just to ensure the Electrode energy is lost. Back in comes Licky Licky. They now have enough energy for a Body Slam. They no shield as well. They get KO'd. They have Shadow Kingdra in the back, and I see a pretty diabolical win condition. I am never going to throw another charge attack for the remainder of this game, because I don't have to. I can just win by going for the brute force farm down. Just like that, my opponent's already lost 80% of their health. Swift will knock me out, but my opponent realizes they can't win the game, so they are just going to concede the match. We move to the next match, picking up a very nice lead, leading Shadow Celio into Galarian Moltres. My opponent safe switches into Seismitoad, and I guess I somehow lagged a turn, because I should always outpace there due to the 1-turn switch, but somehow that ended up being a charge attack priority die. Even with that lag, this should still be a very good matchup for Shadow Celio just because I have so much fast move pressure. I'm able to Powder Snow them very easily into Surf range. whereas my opponent can never mud shot me down. They're going to go for a diabolical Icy Wind bait, but guess what? Even at -1 attack, I'm pretty confident Celio's still taking this KO. Surf lands, Seismitoad falls, opponent's going to bring back in the Galarian Moltres, and I'm always just going to stay in here and concede the farm down. Because I have a very hard answer to Galarian Moltres in the back with the Unova Stunfisk, so I'm very fine conceding farm. Now I can bring in the Stunfisk, my opponent banks a Brave Bird, it's Kanto Ninetales in the back, in comes Kingdra, and there's just no way out for my opponent. We move to the next match, picking up a very nice lead, leading Shadow Celio into Fearow. My opponent safe switches into Tinkaton. Tinkaton, not normally known for being a particularly safe swap, and now I get to send out Unova Stunfisk. I always want to try and switch into this matchup pretty quickly, because if you end up giving Tinkaton a pretty big energy head start, then Tinkaton can and will flip this matchup. I'm going to be no shielding as they go for another Bulldoze. That's really not going to be a big problem for me whatsoever. I will throw that Mud Bomb a little bit early though, because I did not want my opponent to catch back out onto the Fearow. I just want them to get KO'd as quickly as possible. Back in comes the Fearow. I'm going to overfarm by 1 just to try and hide how much residual energy that I have. I fire off Discharge, Fearow's going to be no shielding, Fearow will have to CMP time me, but the fact that I overfarmed earlier actually makes them lose count. I'm able to make a second Discharge and pressure away a shield. Add to that the fact that they're unable to get a farm down, and man, this game is just going incredibly well. Now I get to bring in the Shadow Celio. Interesting call to make here whether I decide to put up the shield. I decided to save 2 shields for the Kingdra. In the back, my opponent has Mimikyu, and I fire off an instant Body Slam to break the disguise. There's no point in charging the Body Slam, it's not going to do any damage, but all I need to do is just put them at -1 defense and then look at the Powder Snows get to work. Shadow Celio does actually win the 0 shield against Mimikyu, because you can Body Slam immediately just to pressure away the disguise, you can survive all the Shadow Claws in the play rough, and with the Powder Snow damage, you can actually make it to a Surf that takes the knockout. So that's one of the reasons why I actually wanted it on the team, was it is sneakily a very good answer to Mimikyu. Mimikyu will go for the Shadow Sneak. I'm just going to keep farming. Eventually, they're going to try for a catch. And you know what? If you never throw your charge attack, they can never catch it. And my opponent will resign the match. Great lead in the next match, Shadow Celio into A9. My opponent safe switches into Licky Licky, and I will respond with the Stunfisk. My team is very weak to A9 in the back. Even though I had a very favorable lead, I'm a little bit worried that my opponent may be able to make a play for switch advantage. If they're able to flip switch, that would be an absolute catastrophe, as Kingdra gets completely shut down by A9. My opponent's going to fire off another Shadow Ball. I'm always going to be no shielding, and I'm going to look to farm up to the back-to-back discharges. After landing 1 Mud Bomb, I should be able to take the knockout with back-to-back discharges, so I won't need to go for a second Mud Bomb. My opponent ends up pivoting out into a Venusaur. I bank a Mud Bomb and send in Kingdra. Now, Venusaur is not a Pokemon that's too frequently used in the Open Great League, but this team is honestly very soft to Venusaur. That Frenzy Plant did huge damage, but Kingdra has just enough bulk. I'm going to make it to the back-to-back Swifts. First Swift is going to get the shield. Second Swift is going to put them basically into farm down range for the Celio. That's going to force out the final shield from my opponent. And now I can bring in the Celio. Powder Snows are going to start to shred. My opponent's highly likely to go for the Sludge Bait, but even if it's a bait, I still have to put up the shield. However, good news for me, I'm able to make it to the Body Slam. Shadow Body Slam knocks out the Venusaur. The energy is lost. Back in comes Licky Licky. I try and go for the Snipe, but I accidentally end up doing a CMP sack swap, to which I do not win. So the energy ends up being lost, but I still should be able to take the win, because Shadow Celio will be able to knock out Licky Licky. And I'm outside of a range where a Dazzling Gleam would take the KO. Although typically Alolan Ninetales will run Chilling Water, and my opponent's CMP tying on 6 means they're on Chilling Water and this game will be a win. Because even at -1, Shadow Surf just does way too much damage. Shadow Celio is the GOAT. Look at that -1 Surf damage. That is just absolutely criminal, and my opponent will resign the match. Hopping to the final match, Shadow Celio into Mimikyu. I fire off the Body Slam right away, just to break the disguise, and now it feels like the battle can truly begin. Look at how much damage these Powder Snows are doing. The fact that my opponent's staying in makes me think Celio could have value, so I will shield up the Play Rough. Oh my goodness, that's not a Play Rough, that's a Thunder. I am incredibly happy that I shielded there. Well, I guess I have to amend my earlier statement. Shadow Celio wins the zeros against Mimikyu unless the Mimikyu player is a Giga Chad running Thunder, in which case you would definitely get KO'd. My opponent sends in Primeape by fire off the Body Slam to get the shield back, and then just save switch into Stunfisk. I really hate save switching into Stunfisk. It is not a very flexible Pokemon, but against the Primeape that's up energy, I find it to be one of the most effective things that you can throw at a Primeape, because even though they have Ice Punch, I'm still able to get some very nice damage. Mud Bomb put them very low. I decided to go for the CMP tie here. Ice Punch would knock me out, and I want to guarantee the final shield or guarantee that this energy is lost. Primeape energy is not something I'm a fan of. They end up no shielding. In the back, it's a Mantine, and this game is going to be a win. I'm hitting for double super effective with Thunder Shocks and Discharge. That's going to pressure away my opponent's final shield, and now I can pivot into the Shadow Celio. Celio will get a body slam. This is not insignificant damage onto the Mantine. Mantine is suddenly below 50% HP, and they are in a tremendous amount of trouble. They're going to have to go for a Twister to take the knockout. I can bring back in the Stunfisk. Each Thunder Shock is going to hit for a ton of damage. They immediately fire off energy, and I know the Kingdra does not get one-shot by Twister. So now I can bring in the Kingdra. Mantine will make it to the Twister, but it's just not going to matter. My opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. While this Open Great League week was going on, I did want to showcase a strong climbing team that did not feature Mimikyu, because I know a lot of trainers may not have played the April Fool's event and do not have a Mimikyu available. Not only is this team very strong, but I think this team also does quite well into a lot of the Mimikyu teams as well. A lot of the anti-Mimikyu teams feature Pokemon like Fearow and Diggersby, and it's really hard to build a Fearow or Diggersby team that isn't very soft to Shadow Celio. So if you beat a lot of the anti-Mimikyu teams and you beat Mimikyu, honestly, it seems like Shadow Celio is really well positioned. But to me, I think the true star of the show is Kingdra. Kingdra offers insane neutral consistency in this meta. You wouldn't really think that just adding one charge attack and Surf would be a complete difference maker, but oh my goodness, I absolutely loved getting to play Kingdra. Kingdra is so fast, having that 9-turn pacing, especially as a Pokemon that I very frequently use as a safe swap. If I'm able to get up even just a little bit of energy, Kingdra has insane potential to flip some pretty catastrophically bad matchups, like Mimikyu, for example, Tinkaton, and Carbink. So all in all, I'm a huge Kingdra fan. I think Kingdra can be put on just about any team, and you're going to have some very nice results. Now, I do have a Shadow Kingdra. I do think Shadow Kingdra is very strong, at least for my personal play style. I did like the bulk of the regular, because I felt like the regular Kingdra, it was just surviving hits in a way that the Shadow could not. However, the Shadow, I think, would just play a lot more aggressively, but still very strong, but just in a very different manner. Whereas the Shadow would need more of a heavy shield investment, but in return, you could probably go for a lot of like Surf and Farm Down or Swift and Farm Down, whereas more often than not, you're throwing 2 charge attacks with the regular Kingdra, but because you're bulky, you're actually able to take a hit and just outpace them and make it to the 2. So all in all, I think this team is very strong. I will say the things this team struggled against the most were if you end up leading into Kanto Ninetales, that can be a little bit uncomfortable. Usually I end up just no shielding, taking the shield advantage, going straight for the Surf, and then getting Kingdra on the field, as Kingdra up a shield can accomplish absolute miracles and Annihilate. I only saw one Annihilate, but unfortunately I was not recording, but man, if you see a Shadow counter Annihilate, you're probably going to be in for a pretty rough day with this team, because Kingdra doesn't do too well there, and obviously Celio doesn't do well either. So unfortunately, I didn't have footage of that recorded, but if you do see Annihilate, it's pretty uncommon with Mimikyu being so frequent, and Mimikyu just like obliterates Annihilate. But if you do happen to run into a rogue Annihilate, that would definitely not be a fun Pokemon for this team to encounter. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not, and an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel helps me do what I do, so thank you oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.